Please welcome our brother, David Montoya.
So you heard a little bit, that was the first third of my life. And I was also a musician, and I got to travel around. And in the course of my travels, this is in my 20s, I met a beautiful young lady. Her name was Noelle Donnelly. She was asthmatic. And one night when I was with her, she started to have an acute asthmatic attack. At the time, everyone was taking steroids to cure it. And in fact, just a couple of weeks before she had her event, her doctor had said she was in great shape. She had been giving up smoking. She was swimming. And that night, she said, "I'm having an attack. Get me to the hospital." And this was in Plandome, and St. Francis Hospital was just around the corner, and as I drove her to the hospital, she died in my arms. We were engaged, and it kind of changed the trajectory of how I went through my education, but she died in my arms. And then the other thing to know is that on my father's side, my grandfather died when he was 53. My father died when he was 59, and my maternal grandfather died when he was 63. I was always fearful of death, to the point where when I was having my first child, I went to see a psychiatrist, and he was an older gentleman on Fifth Avenue, in his 70s at the time, and he said, "In all my years of practice, I've never met a person who's more fearful of death." And I just said, "Yeah, that's it." I would just wake up in the middle of the night saying, "This can all be gone right now, and that's the end of it." And you saw some of the education and some of the things that I did, but as Paul kind of wanted me to tell you, I was an evil person. And I think I might have even once before spoken about this. And by evil, I mean, if there was a penny left on the table in negotiating a deal, I didn't care. I was taking it. If money was being lost in a deal, I was coming after you, to the point where some of the things to share, a company lost a large sum of money, 9 figures in one of my funds, and I figured out that the people did some things wrong, but I figured out that the CEO's wife and the COO's wife both worked for the company. And I said to myself, if I sue not just the company and not just the executives, but also the wives, it's going to make for a really difficult Thanksgiving. And I went after them, and I just kept suing them. And that was my life. Just a miserable person. Ended up getting a divorce because I wasn't around. I was, as I think I said to you, Paul, if you've ever seen Michael Douglas in a film where he plays the terrible husband, that was me. Check every single box of every single thing that you can do wrong as a human being. Whatever God said to do, I made sure to do the opposite, because that's it. You live your life, you die, there's nothing, that's the end of it. And this went on for years and years and years. And then in the course of the businesses that I had, I happened to hire a guy, and I was told at the time, this guy's like a really super religious guy. And I said, I don't care if this freak can, do whatever he's doing. As long as he can sell, that's all that I care about. And, I'll probably make jokes behind his back. And we were out in San Francisco, and in the course of talking with him, he said, hey, I'm going to this meeting. It's this group called NCS. And this is about, 5 years ago, 6 years ago that I probably joined NCS. So he said, why don't you go with me? And I said, yeah, I'll go. And in my mind, it was, I'm going to go. I'm going to see all these guys that are just nutcases, and then I'm going to have some great stories to tell afterwards. And I went to it. It was just an absolute beautiful day in this conference room of an office building. And similar to this, some people got up and they gave their talks. And by the end, I was crying. And to get a tear out of me back in those days, it was impossible. There wasn't, I think the time my father passed away was in '94, was the only time I had cried before then. I just was a hardened person with no love in my heart. Didn't want to help anybody except for myself and my partners. But I was crying. And it was a transformative moment. And it just brought me back to what am I doing wrong with my life? And from that point on, I've tried to make changes. Not perfect. I think, I know I'm still a sinner, but it changed the way I approached things, and every day I'm trying to get better at that. So about, I guess it's about 18, 19 months ago, I'm going through my divorce. I'm at home. I'm up in my room. My 3 children are there. And just like now, I have a tendency to pace around, and I was pacing around. And the next thing I knew, I was talking to my father. I don't remember the exact conversation, but I was talking to him. And then I started talking to Noel. And then the next thing I remember after that is waking up, and my son, my oldest boy, was doing chest compressions on me because I had died. And he had called the 911, and the police and the ambulance show up. And I had bitten my tongue. I remember that when I came back. And so EMT was there, and they were saying, we're going to take you to the hospital. And at that moment, all of the fears that I had of death were just gone. And as I stand here today, from that moment till today, there's been no concerns, no worries, just nothing. I saw my father, I saw Noel, and I was just so happy. And as I stand here today, despite what I look like, I'm actually a really happy person because I have no worries. And EMT is trying to get me onto the stretcher to take me to the hospital. And I'm worried now about my children because I'm saying, well, where are they going to stay? My kids at the time, the youngest, are like 13 years old. And I said, maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe I'll be okay. And one of the EMTs looked at me and he said, if something happens to you, we're not going to be held liable. And I said, if I die, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. I won't come back to sue you. That'll kind of be the end of it. Well, I was just shocked that they could even find a heart in here, but they did. So that goes on, and then my ex, her father was very, very sick. He had some health problems, and she flew out to see him before he passed away in Seattle. And in the course of this, I said, look, take care of whatever you have to do. I'm going, I'll take care of the kids, obviously, while you're out of town. And it was probably about 3 a.m, and I just shot up out of bed, and I knew that he had passed away, and I knew that he was going to heaven. There was just this moment of, I don't want to call it like a bright light, but there was just that moment of awareness. And so the day starts, and I'm speaking to Cheryl, and she tells me that earlier that day around midnight, Pacific time, he had passed away. And it just came to me, and I said, yeah, I know. I knew that he's going to be okay. He's going to heaven. So I've kind of been on this journey, and in the course of kind of what I've learned, I think for anybody that's ever heard me, it's always been something about God's will be done. That's the story that always, not the story, but that's kind of the comment that I always have. And I didn't understand it before I had my, as I tell my kids, my heart event. But I need to just live my life now doing what God wants. I used to have a conversation with Reverend Revell about God and what he wants us to do. And I always kind of say to people that God gives us all the signs. He tells us, drive 55, right? That's how I kind of equate it. You know you should drive 55 on the highways. You know you should stop at the stop signs and yield at the yield signs. And you have a choice. God gives us the free will to kind of go out there and do the wrong thing. And that's what I did for many, many years of my life. I just wasn't following the signs. But if you do, then you don't have to worry about most of the time, you don't have to worry about something going wrong. Something else happened recently. And again, it was one of these, I knew something was going to happen. My cousin, her entire family, my father was an only child. But he had a number of cousins out in New Mexico, and one of them was who was about the same age as him, was my Uncle Alfred. And my Uncle Alfred was a priest, and then he met a woman, and he left the priesthood, but he was just one of the kindest people I ever met. Didn't understand sarcasm at the time, didn't understand any of my jokes. If I said something a little bit off, he'd kind of turn his head and just kind of look at me. And that was the entire family. That is the entire family. That there's just not a bad bone in their body. And I got a call the other day that one of my favorite cousins, she's in her mid-30s, let's say, was driving on the Pacific Coast Highway. And she was driving in, I guess, kind of the lane that was closest to oncoming traffic. And a car sideswiped her. And she was pushed into oncoming traffic and hit by 5 cars. And it was just horrific. We weren't sure that she was going to survive. They were able to save her, but she's going to be a paraplegic for the rest of her life. And it was a T3 break, I guess, in the spinal cord. So it's relatively high up, and what I've now learned is that it goes from like 1 through 12, 1 starting at the top, 12 going down. The higher up it is, the more it affects the lungs and everything. And when I got the news, again, all I could do was pace. But I said to my cousin, and I spoke to her, and I kind of said, this is God's plan. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, and I know it's going to be horrific for months and months and years. But what I've seen now is this is just a journey. I was kind of saying before that if the journey is getting to Miami Beach, and you're on a plane with lots of turbulence and you're not very happy or something like that, as soon as you land at your destination, you kind of forget about it, and you're just like, everything's going to be okay. I'm here, it's sunny, the water's warm and nice. And after going through what I went through, the way I kind of approach everything now is that this is that bumpy plane ride. This is that moment of, okay, sometimes it's going to be really smooth sailing, and sometimes it's going to just, be big wind shears and dips and everything like that, and I'm not going to enjoy it. But this isn't what's important. I believe in God, and I believe in Jesus, and I believe in heaven, and that's where I'm trying to get to. And if I have difficulties along the way, what that moment back in February of 2020 kind of taught me was that I hope it wasn't just a kind of a sneak peek and I'm going to the other place. I hope it wasn't, like, this is maybe what you could get, but you're not getting it, kid. You're going to go down to fire and all kinds of other stuff. But it's kind of taught me that all of those fears that I had are just gone. And all of a sudden, I don't know, for the past, whatever it's been now, 17, 18 months, there's just been a complete peace, a complete kind of, okay, something bad happened today, potential for something good to happen tomorrow, maybe it'll be another day of bad, but I'm okay with that, because this isn't what's important. It's doing the right thing. And one of the things that happened to me after this was, so I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, and I'm gonna watch myself here, Paul, so this may take a second. So it was very difficult for me to say out loud, I love you. It was okay to say to my mom. Most people, that's not even a big deal. Grandparents, easy enough to say. Children, depending on whether they're hitting you up for $20 or not, you may or may not say, I love you. But, just kidding. But I started saying in the course of talking to partners and friends and others, I love you. I love every single person here in this room. People that I know, people that I don't know, people that I'll meet. That's the other takeaway. And what's weird is I would be on the phone. I'm on the phone with Rich Cohen. And he was talking to me. He was like, we've become friends. We're like brothers, and we're partners in business. And I said, Rich, I love you. And I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. I thought I might know what the reaction was going to be. But he said right back to me, I love you too. And I've been saying that more and more to people, and it feels so good. It's just been amazing. And it wouldn't have happened 6 years ago, that's for sure, because I was in love with money, and I was in love with power, and I was in love with myself. But as I stand here today, it's just a love inside of me as a result of that transformative experience. I know there was one of the times before my father passed away. He was a very. I'll tell you two things about him. So one thing was my father was really, really smart, but quiet man. When Noel died, he gave me one of the biggest hugs ever and told me that he loved me. He was the kind of guy that, before he passed away, and I always remember this, and again, I'm kind of like the Forrest Gump. I've had all these lucky experiences and looked back, just being at the right place at the right time. He came into the city one day when I was in my, I guess, early 20s, And he just came into the city. And it was one of these times when I was at that age where it was almost like, all right, I'll have some eggs and bacon with you, but I just want to kind of get on with my life. But he made it a point of just kind of spending time with me. And I look back on that as another one of these kind of road signs that God gave me in terms of here was someone trying to show me love. But at the time, I was still in I'm going to conquer the world, and the way to do that is by being evil. And when I look back at this, I kind of realize, and we hugged, and it's just one of those moments that sticks back in my mind in terms of what God has kind of shown me in the course of my life. He's given me all of these signs. He's given me all of these opportunities. And it wasn't until I really got a slap in the face or a punch to the heart or whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't until I really just kind of opened my eyes and accepted and said, I'm going to love you, God, and I'm going to try and do the right thing. Like I said, I know I'm not perfect, and I know I get things wrong, but I'm trying. I wanted to show, before I end, so when I first saw this movie, Chariots of Fire, I did not get it. Just not smart enough to get it the first time. But I kept watching it over and over and over, and eventually I figured out, when I started listening to it, I saw that there was a religious theme in it. I'm not that smart a guy. But I loved what was being said. And during my wedding, one of the readings was this. And also for anyone that knows me, again, I apologize. You've heard these stories before. I've got like 5 stories that I can tell, and I tell them over and over and over. But this was one of the passages, and I've been saying till now, I always say, this is, I love Isaiah 40. And to me, when I look back at all the road signs that God has left me in my life, I kind of say, he's been telling me this all along, that it's God's will. It's not mine. I can want a lot of different things. I can want to do this. I can want this to happen or that to happen. But that's not his plan. And after the experience, I kind of realized again that this isn't what's important. What's important is doing the right thing here and loving here so that I can be with him for all eternity in heaven. If you don't believe that, then yeah, I can worry about all of the things and the people that have died too young. But if I flip it in my mind, and again, maybe I'm getting this all wrong, those people are in heaven. And I think that's where I want to be as well, so they're in a better place. So, do we have this?
My text this afternoon is taken from Isaiah, chapter 40. Behold, the nations are as a drop in the bucket, and are counted as the small dust in the balance. All nations before him are as nothing. They are counted to him less than nothing. Vanity. He bringeth the princes to nothing. He maketh the judges of the earth as a vanity. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary.
Juvenile! This kind of business.
I know, Sam.
He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no strength he increaseth might. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. And they shall walk and not faint.
That's how exhausted I was. So, thank you.